And I'm thrilled to introduce our first expert today. Let's get to know Chris Snipes at Cybercore Technologies.
Good afternoon, Ella. Thank you. My name is Chris Snipes. I am the IT manager here at CyberCore Technologies. My main responsibilities are maintaining our internal IT infrastructure, maintaining all of our accreditations, all of our compliances, as well as client support and infrastructure setup and design. I've been with the company 14 years now. Um, had a brief IT background before that, working mainly in troubleshooting and hardware tech, but have grown quite quickly in the field as the field is ever expanding.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Moving on to our next expert for today, let's hear from Carl Drago at Cyber Construction Inc.
Thank you for the introduction, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Carl. I'm with Cyber Construction. There's going to be a lot of cybers here today, so get prepared for that. Uh, I actually own and operate the business. We've been in business now for 26 years, 27 come this January. While we offer quite a bit of different services as well, one of our areas and our verticals is, of course, with IT, cybersecurity, and everything we're going to be chatting about here today. So I'm looking forward to getting some questions and hopefully providing two non-technical of answers for everybody.
Great. Now, last but certainly not the least, let's hear from Paul Love at Cybertron.
Hi, my name is Paul, and um, I started the company about a year ago in cybersecurity managed services. So we do everything from helping with companies with databases, cybersecurity, um, and managing day-to-day operations. My background, I've been working in the field for about 10 years, and implementing various solutions for companies, and also working in the cybersecurity field and helping managing services as well. So,
Awesome. Thank you,
right.
gentlemen. To our audiences, we invite you to engage in this discussion, which will last approximately 1 hour, followed by a Q&A session. You can post your questions or comments during the discussion in the Q&A chat at any time. We'll monitor and showcase some of the questions to propel the session further. A gentle reminder to please be respectful and appropriate with your questions and comments. Any inappropriate questions or comments will be removed along with the attendees posting such comment. If you can't stay for the full event, be sure to watch the replay and set up a meet and greet with one of our experts. You'll get a call after the event from a member of our team to gather your feedback, complete your voice verification, and set up your meet and greet if you want one. Now let's get right to it. On our first data set, we gathered insight, from over 300 plus technical decision makers. We asked them, to identify their business's greatest data security threat. And here's what they said, as you can see here, 48% of them stated it's phishing attack, while 37% of them stated it's malware or ransomware, 35% stated user error, 31%, wow, it says data breach, and the others, as you can see here, 15%, insider threats, endpoint attack, vulnerabilities in the cloud, as you can see on my screen. Now I'm gonna pass it over to Carl. What are your insight on these findings, and how effective are the latest security solutions against the most common threats today?
Sure. Well, first, I'd say that this is fairly accurate from what I've seen and working with my clients with cybersecurity. the insider threats, things like that. A lot of it really does come down to a little bit of education within companies as well. But unfortunately, there's so many different types of software out there these days that's all capable of handling this to certain extents. Are any of them 100% effective? No, the answer is no. Every day, the software gets a little bit better to prevent, and somebody else finds their way around it every single day. So it's just an ongoing battle. What I've found, though, is working with somebody in the industry, whether it's myself, Chris, or Paul, we would offer probably suggestions and solutions based on several factors. How many employees you may have, the size of the company itself, what type of business it is. Believe it or not, there are certain industries that require a little bit extra security, especially HIPAA compliance. But I have seen, and we work with personally, I'm sure the other gentlemen on the panel today will share their experiences, but we do provide and offer some services that accompany everything that you're seeing on this list into one central piece of software. But I would say this is very accurate and should be taken very seriously.
Thank you. What's your thought about this, Chris? Would you like to add anything?
Sure. So I 100% agree with my colleague. This is a very accurate depiction of the types of threats that are out there and what is the most dangerous. The scary part about this is that, number one, phishing attacks coincides very closely to user error. Most phishing attacks are successful because of that user error, and that's a very difficult area to try to help control. Um, the best you can do is to train, train, and train. Um, as Carl said, there is centralized software out there that can not only help mitigate these risks, but can also incorporate training within it, interactive training, and give you very, very accurate results as to where your problems areas are. Um, the areas I deal in mostly have to deal with not just HIPAA compliance, but there's federal compliances involved. Um, every area has their own, um, shall we say, strengths and weaknesses. But overall, what I have found to be the most successful is not only to get the proper software in place, but to make sure that you are constantly reviewing and making sure that your setup is accurate and having somebody on your side that can help do that for you, because everyone knows how limited their resources are, would really come in handy to be able to help fine tune that and keep you safe.
Cool. Paul, what are your thoughts?
I would say yes. What I've been seeing in the industry is phishing attacks, and the best way to protect, like my colleague said, it was training your employees, and that's one of the things that we offer is security awareness training. It is a very useful tool to look out for social engineering attacks, different types of emails that are, being used, especially during the holidays that are coming up. They are really starting to increase in phishing emails to, really get people to, click on the certain emails. So I think that is, really important. And then, utilizing the software to, mitigate those type of attacks on the system is, really important, keeping things updated and using the latest software out there to prevent any attacks on the network as well.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Those are really valuable insights. let's move on to our next slide. So we reached out to over 300 technical decision makers and asked them, in light of the current threat landscape and their data security priorities, which do they intend to focus for their initiative, like in the next 12 months? And here's what we've uncovered. Like 30% of them stated they'll focus on endpoint management. 26% of them stated they'll focus on cloud security. 23% of them stated security alerts. User behavior analysis would be at 22%. Multi-factor authentication is at 20%. I have two things for, let's hear from Chris. I have two things for Chris. What do you think about this analysis, and which security measures or tools should be prioritized this year?
Okay. My first thoughts on this are that, number one, I think that a few of the things on here should be a little bit higher priority than they're listed. For one, I would say this: if you don't already have multi-factor authentication in all of your critical systems, that is your number one priority right now. If you do not have multi-factor authentication, it leaves you wide open for hackers to be able to go in, spoof your logins, and get whatever information they need. If you don't already have that, do it now. Find somebody that can help you. Endpoint management, I feel, I think that needs to be reviewed almost on a yearly or a contractual basis. There are so many providers out there that offer endpoint management. And I think it changes personally year to year as to who actually does a better job at doing that. I do not feel that once you have that in place, you should rest. I think you should always have that in the back of your mind and always wonder whether or not you've got the best system in place. Everything else on here, I feel, is at a good percentage, and everything on here does need to be taken a look at and seen seriously. It's just a matter of where your company's priorities lie. And that really depends on what you currently have in place and what you're missing out of any of these subjects. If you're missing any of them, that should be your highest priority.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Carl, anything to add?
The only thing that I'd like to add, and I agree with everything Chris just said, multi-factor should definitely be much higher on the list. I realize why it's not in this particular case, but that is number one. The one thing I'm seeing missing from this list, unless it's encompassed under perhaps cloud security, is email. I don't see email. That's where a lot of the phishing comes in. That's where a lot of the problems, possible malware, comes in through email. Again, it may have been categorized a little differently looking at this list, but to me, that's just as important as getting that multi-factor authentication. Let's be honest. We all use our email every single day, whether you get 20 emails, 100 emails, or in some cases, 1,000 emails a day. That's your front door that you're leaving wide open if you're not protected. So I would stress that email is also considered and looked at quickly. A lot of our clients recently who have not wanted to move over to cybersecurity are finding themselves in a little bit of pickles once in a while. I won't get into details, but let's just say once something happens, it's easier to kind of sell to them, but by then they've already gone through all the pain. Sometimes that's what it takes, but I'd like to stress email should be on this list and very high near the top as well.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Carl. What about you, Paul? What are your thoughts?
I agree with Carl on that as well. Two-factor authentication should be, on the top priority to help prevent, especially being, hacked or, from being, prevent, low attacks on the network as well. and also having, the email protection in place is, I think, really important. Even email encryption is really important. I noticed in the, some organizations is the higher ups are always the target at times as well. And all them also the employees as well. But, having that protection in place to, safeguard, the malware and the phishing attacks, I think is, really important. Uh, and having those backups. And there's some really great, tools out there to help, along the way to protect, the data in those kind of emails and stuff like that. So I think I feel like that's really important to have. Um,
Great, great. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Now, lastly, for our last data points for today's session, I actually have two set of data that I'd like to share with everyone. And let's look at the first one. So we gathered insights from, 43 technical decision makers, and we asked them if there was a data breach, does their company have business continuity or disaster recovery plan in place today? 65% of them stated yes, 25% of them stated no, and 10% of them stated that they're not sure. So that's the first data set. Let's look at the second data set for this question. From over 300 technical decision makers, regarding the top challenges related to cyber resiliency that they're currently facing, here's what we've identified. Like 38% of them stated it's security and compliance. 31% of them stated challenges keeping data protected or secure. 30% of them stated it's aging or legacy gear. 23% of them identifying attacks early on. And as you can see, the rest are on the, 14% high cost of operations. Everything else is on the data sets here. So I'm going to pass this over to Paul. So Paul, I have two things for you. What can you say about this data? And does the average company have a sufficient incident response plan in place?
Having a sufficient response plan in place is, really important in, keeping your operations up and running, and having the proper, tools in place to, um, help safeguard, your business is, really important. And also, having the, documentation of the network and and how for the operation, I think it's really important to have that in place to protect to protect the company, and then also resolving issues more faster, in a quickly fashion. So I think having that is really important.
Okay. Good to thank you so much, Paul, for that. Chris, what can you say about these statistics?
Well, if you could do me a favor, can we go back to the first data set slide really quick?
Of course.
So what I'm going to say here are two big things. Number one, the fact that we have a 65% under yes. Number one tells me that people either don't know or they're trying to cover themselves, because I guarantee you the number of people that can truthfully say yes is not 65%. It is much
Mhm.
lower than that. The thing that really scares me about this slide is the 10% said, I don't know.
Mhm.
If you don't know what kind of incident response plan you have, then your answer is no, you don't have one. There should never be a don't know. You're a no. If we could go back to the other slide then.
Yep.
In my experience, with the people that I've dealt with, there are three major blockages to having a fully executed incident response plan. And the three on here that is the aging or legacy gear. That is absolutely a big problem in the field. And it is one of the main problems due to one of the other issues on here, and that is the high cost of operation. It is becoming increasingly more difficult to be able to secure the funding that it takes to get yourself fully prepared. Uh, and that's why the aging gear is of such a big problem. The other problem that we have on here is absolutely security and compliance. As more and more threats come out, as more and more holes are found in the software that is out there, compliance is an ever-changing field. The bottom line in looking at all these stats and looking where areas need to be improved is to understand that incident response is never complete. You never have a fully executed plan. It's always changing, and you're constantly having to look at it, and you're constantly having to take a look at the areas you need to improve, because you'll never be 100%. The biggest key is to try to get the right tools in place, to try to get the right people on your side, and stay proactive versus reactive when threats arise.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Chris. Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, Chris said pretty much what I wanted to discuss as well. So I'm glad he saw that and brought that up. Again, you don't have to go back, but on that previous slide, we saw that 65% of people thought that they had a plan.
Mhm.
I look at that in two ways. First of all, I'm with Chris. That's a much, much lower number. But it's also possible that these people believe that they have a solid plan, at least their feeling of a solid plan.
Mhm.
I've still come across clients doing local backups on tapes, and they think if something goes wrong, that well, I'm backed up. I have everything. It doesn't work that way. So you may think that you have a few things in place, but it does not substitute speaking to a professional in the field that could assess what you currently have now, what your needs may be, and come up with a better solution or game plan. Then we would see that percentage drop. And again, with Chris saying that 10% who's not sure, you have to be sure, whether it's a yes or whether it's a no. And if it's a no, it needs to turn into a yes. There is just simply no question. I have had clients call me panicked that their machine just completely died. Their whole life is on it. Everything is on it. Do you have
Mhm.
backups? No backups. It becomes bigger and bigger issues. So anybody that said no and anybody that said I don't know needs to turn into a yes. I'll stress that more than reviewing this slide because it's that important. It is simply that important.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Carl. Okay. Um, looks like we have a question from the audience. Here's the question. I am a small business and cannot afford all of the latest security stuff. What would you say are the top three solutions that I should have? Chris?
Top three solutions, in my opinion.
Mm.
Number one is email security. You need to have a robust spam filter, phishing filter in place. That will help get rid of a lot of user error. Number two, get yourself a robust training program for your employees. make sure they understand what threats are out there, make sure they know what to look for so that it's easier for them to catch before things happen, and not make those mistakes that allow somebody into your system. And number 3 is to make sure that you have some sort of vulnerability scanner or penetration testing in place that's going to be able to test your systems, find what security risks are in them, and be able to give you remediation steps to try to help plug those holes.
Thank you, Chris. What about you, Carl?
I'm just about in line with Chris on that. Email comes to mind first, first and foremost. Again, I mentioned that earlier in the conversation. That comes first. Endpoint protection. Again, there's packages that encompass both of those together. And ironically, they're not as expensive and costly as one may think. I don't know everybody's solutions here. We're not here to really pitch today. We're just here to educate and inform. But I want to assure you that they are not as expensive as people think. So you have the email, you have endpoint protection, absolutely training. The only reason I put the other two a little bit ahead is because I would prefer to get something in place. You could always train your staff. Your staff could still make mistakes. So I like to have those first two kind of in play before worrying about the training. But again, that's all preference. And again, I would stress chatting with a professional, looking at some pricing. It may surprise you that it's not as expensive as you think. And for a lot of people right now, the free thing you could do is on any account that has multi-factor authentication, make sure it's activated. You could do that right now for free on anything you have that you're currently working with that would support it.
Love that, recommendation, Carl. Thank you. Paul, anything that you would like to add? Whoops. Paul, you're on mute.
Yes, so I would say, email two-factor, email is really important. And then having, two-factor authentication, in place is, really important. And like I said, if you have like Office 365, you can actually, turn that on and implement that for your employees, at no cost to you're already using the Office 365 package, and then and having some type of security awareness training as well is really important, and to be able just to educate the employees on what to look for is really important. And sometimes they have really good like end of the year deals right now. We're like in the last quarter, so sometimes you can get a really good deal.
Cool, cool, cool. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping us answer that question.